Hello and welcome back to Doctor Who, The Cancelled Years, the series where I showcase my thoughts on what Doctor Who would have been like if it wasn't cancelled in 1989. In this episode, we'll be moving away from the main TV show and instead looking at the second proper spin-off, The Adventures of Sarah Jane Smith, starring Elizabeth Sladen. The Adventures of Sarah Jane Smith would have been the second official Doctor Who spin-off, barring K9 and Company. With Doctor Who changing with the Dalek Gallifreyan War, Russell decided to introduce two new Doctor Who spin-offs, which would act similar to Doctor Who. This show was aimed at the younger audience of Doctor Who. The concept of the spin-off came after season 37 concluded. Russell had wanted to do a spin-off aimed at the younger demographic, but wasn't 100% sure how to go with it. After seeing how popular Sarah Jane was in season 37, he met with Elizabeth Sladen about the possibility of her doing her own show as Sarah, which she was happy to do, and thus the show was born. Russell would act as showrunner while also being an executive producer alongside Matthew Robinson. For producer, newcomer Phil Collinson was given the role. The show would have aired on the recently launched CBBC. Therefore, this classified this show as a kids show. Because of this, the budget for the show would have been really low, being the cheapest show out of the three Doctor Who shows at the moment. But because of this, the story count would only be at 4. Each story would be made up of 2 30-minute episodes. The premise of the show would have involved Sarah Jane investigating aliens and having adventures with her niece, along with her friends from high school. The cast would have been made up of 4 characters: Elizabeth Sladen as Sarah Jane Smith, Jo Joyner as Lizzie Martin, Bruno Langley as Aaron Harrison, and Noel Clarke as Nick Jones. Now with all that out the way, let's see what's in store for this season. The first story would have been Back to School, written by Russell T Davies and Toby Whithouse. Back to School would have been partly based on the series 2 story, School Reunion, however it would have had significant changes to it. The role of the Doctor would have gone to Sarah, who goes undercover in the school as a teacher, and the character of Rose would have been replaced with Lizzie Martin, Sarah's niece who works in the cafe of the school as part of her work experience. The characters of Aaron and Nick would have been introduced to Sarah and Lizzie when they bump into them in the corridors of the school at night. Sarah and Lizzie are investigating while Aaron and Nick had snuck in after hours to mess around. From there on, the story plays as it does with School Reunion, however the ending would have been a bit different. K9 Mark III still gets blown up, but never gets replaced or repaired. Therefore there would be no K9 Mark IV as there is in real life. The ending would have saw everyone in Sarah's garden, with everyone having a nice little time. Nick and Aaron ask if they can tag along with Sarah for some future adventures, which she happily accepts. The second story would have been The Girl with Blood Hair, written by Russell T Davies. The Girl with Blood Hair would have been set 2 months after the last story. The school has been repaired after being blown up, and Lizzie, Aaron and Nick are back in class. In class, they find a new student named Feronia Mortem. Feronia comes across as a pale and uninteresting person, so Nick and Ava pass her off as a goth. Lizzie tries to make friends with Feronia and make her comfortable in her new school. However, Feronia isn't really interested in Lizzie. After school, Lizzie stalks Feronia back to her house, where she lives in this big, dark, almost spooky house. Lizzie goes to knock on the door, but finds that it creaks open by itself. She enters the house and it appears to have been abandoned for years. She goes upstairs and spies Feronia through a door crack. She sees Veronia talking into a mirror and her hair begins to turn into a bloody red colour. It turns out that Veronia is a part of a race known as the family of Sanguis. Their race are similar to the myths of vampires. They bite the necks of their victims and convert them into Sanguis. However, the family were believed to be extinct after their race was supposedly wiped out, but Veronia survived. Throughout the story we would have saw Sarah and the gang learning about the family and learning that Veronia is starting to make a new family on Earth by converting the entire planet into Sanguis. Veronia is defeated by Sarah and the gang when they expose her to daylight. Her skin turns to dust and she fades away. The third story would have been The Wire, written by Mark Gatiss. The Wire would have essentially been the Series 2 story, The Idiot's Lantern. However, this version of the story would have had significant changes to it. The story would have been set on present-day Earth instead of the 1950s, and people would be tuning in to watch the finale of a musical talent show instead of the Queen's coronation. Also, the character of Tommy in Idiot's Lantern would have been replaced by Aaron. The character of his father would have been very much the same as it was in Idiot's Lantern, however without all the big views on Britain, as it doesn't really fit the story. The final story would have been The Web of Lies, written by Gary Russell. The Web of Lies would have opened up with Sarah going off to investigate a new magic shop, as it's been reported to make people feel uncomfortable. When she gets back, Lizzie, Aaron and Nick notice that Sarah's began to act differently. She seems fine on the surface, but is growing an obsession with rituals. That night, the three of them have a sleepover at Sarah's house. During the night, Nick goes down to fetch a glass of water and spies Sarah in her living room, performing a strange ritual using cobwebs. As he approaches Sarah, the web begins to glow, and after the glowing stops, a giant spider appears. Not just any giant spider, a Metabila spider. It turns out that the magic shop she investigated was taken over by the Metabila spiders, and when Sarah went to investigate it, she became possessed by a spider when one jumped onto her back. The story would have relied on Lizzie, Aaron and Nick to stop the rest of the spiders from getting to Earth. They find that a spider named the Great One is planning to wipe out the Earth and turn the planet into a hatchling ground. However, the three of them are able to stop the spiders by transmitting loud electrical sounds into the spider's space web, killing the Great One's army and sending them back into deep space. This also kills any other spiders on Earth and restores the people back to normal, including Sarah. And that would have concluded Series 1 of The Adventures of Sarah Jane Smith. It proved to be popular with its aimed audience and quickly became one of the most popular shows on CBBC at the time. Next time in this series, we'll be diverting off course for a one-off video. What is this video? You'll see soon. Until then, goodbye.